All right, locked on listeners, we got a special crossover today. It's a man who pulls double duty at the Locked On Network. Locked On Marlins host and Locked On MLB Prospects host Arm Layton is joining Locked On Diamondbacks today. So let's bring him on the show. Arm Layton, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to talk some D-backs prospects and a little bit more, but we're starting to heat up on the hot stove. So I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, the hot stove is interesting. We didn't even talk about this before we hopped on, but let me throw out a random question to you real quick because I saw this circulating around. How do you feel about players being paid based off Fangraphs WAR stat?
I just saw that pop up too, dude. I just saw that pop up. I don't even know how to feel about that.
Yeah.
Like, there's one side of it where it's like arbitration is such a weird concept because it's like, okay, this guy still plays for me, but as a team, I'm going to say why he's not worth what he wants. I always think that's such a weird concept, and then it's settled on, and then you go from there. So I think it's an interesting topic, but I think we got to do a little bit better than just war, being that there's multiple types of war to determine how much a guy should make.
This podcast is basically the anti-war podcast, so I was not a big fan of it when it came out. It's just one of those stats. Like, of course, if you're going off Fangraphs, at least that's consistent. But it's a stat where across what website you look at, they have a different formula for calculating war. So it's
Exactly.
so how can we use a stat that literally different websites measure it differently? So just because of that, and there's so many variables with upside, and who knows, maybe this player was injured during the season or something like that. He had an oblique strain, so that's why his numbers went down. Like, there's just so many different variables. I think paying dudes based off war is not very fair to the players, I think.
I agree 100% because also it's an individual case by case thing, like you said, and that's why they do it case by case, literally in arbitration. So I don't know if that's the right idea, but it kind of shows where the game's headed with a heavy emphasis on those types of things. But yeah, you've got too much difference and discrepancy across war, and I agree with you on that one.
Yeah, so we're probably going to be talking about the hot stove and the CBA and all those things a lot on this podcast. I'm sure your podcast, all the podcasts across the Locked On MLB network. But today, Arm Layton, this is basically going to be the Arm Layton podcast because, of course, we know you pull double duty. You kill it on Locked On Marlins. But today, we need you to wear your other hat. Locked On MLB Prospects host Arm Layton is here with us today. We're going to break down the top 5 prospects, maybe do a little way too early mock draft for the top 2 guys that the D-backs could land, hand out a few awards, talk about MVP, Cy Young. So we got a whole bunch to talk about with Arm Layton, and I want to start here. I don't know. What would you rather do? Would you rather start from the top with the number 1 D-backs prospect, or do you think it's a little cooler start from the bottom with number 5?
You tell me, man, because I get so excited about Corbin Carroll that we might want to save him for last because I might talk for 5-10 minutes on him alone.
Okay, we could save him from last because Corbin Carroll, I like Corbin Carroll a lot. I was upset to see him go down just like a Jordan Lawler.
Gosh.
Like, the D-backs got no freaking breaks this year, man. Like, if the major league team wasn't bad enough, our minor league teams are being crushed as well, too. Thankfully, Alek Thomas was like a huge bright spot. But let's start from the bottom. We're working off basically MLB.com's prospect rankings. And number 5, according to MLB.com, is Ryan Nelson. And I'm going to be honest with you, Arm Layton. With a lot of these guys, I don't know much about them. So I'm just going off these scouting reports that MLB.com has written up. He showed some athleticism at Oregon, spent a couple years there. He won pitcher of the year for the D-backs this season in the minor leagues. He was averaging 14.4 strikeouts per 9 in Division I NCAA. Only signed him for $1 million, or signed him for $1 million below his slot value. So the D-backs got a pretty good steal when they took Ryan Nelson in the draft. But what can you tell me about him?
Yeah, I mean, they've done a really good job developing him, and he's come, a long way and really developing his stuff. And it's funny because I always go on these podcasts and people are like, "Oh yeah, well, I don't know that much about these guys," and I'm like, "You shouldn't. It's so much." And I spend hours and hours just watching this guy throw. Especially after you asked me to come on the pod, I was like, "Okay, I'm going to make sure I do some digging again." Because I've been doing the top 10s for every system in Major League Baseball right now for justbaseball.com, my website, and I'm getting to the D-back system soon. And I'd been doing the digging on Ryan Nelson, and I was floored at how much his secondary stuff has improved. The fastball has always been pretty solid, but the breaking ball, he went to the curveball a lot this year, and it was really darn good. He got a lot of swings and misses on it. And he also mixed in the slider. Slider was really good. And using those two pitches off of each other was fantastic. Then he mixed in a changeup that he threw about 10% of the time as well. So you have 4 pitches from this guy now that he commands well, that he mixes up pretty well. And the fastball has some life too. I really like what we see here. The pitch mix is strong. His command really improved. And I think we saw that. I mean, he only walked about 3 batters per 9, which was a big improvement from the last time we saw him. Almost 13 strikeouts per 9. This guy's putting it together, and I think he projects to be a really solid middle of the rotation arm with the potential to be a number 2 type of starter.
Yeah, his numbers were really good in 2021. Played a little high A, a little double A, 3.17 ERA, 163 strikeouts, and 116 innings pitched. I know you mentioned he has, it seems like a 3-4 pitch arsenal, but what would you say is his plus pitch? What is his go-to strikeout pitch when he needs one in a high leverage moment?
I think that's a great question. And it seems like that curveball is the one that he really relies on. I mean, he got guys to swing and miss on that pitch a ton. And it's right around the 78-mile-an-hour range. He's got a slider, which he'll go to in certain spots, which is more 85 range, 84 miles per hour. But that curveball is a wipeout pitch. And when he's commanding it well, that's definitely his go-to, like, strike him out type of offering. And that was a big reason why he had so much success this year.
Yeah, I'm excited for him, of course. With a lot of these guys, you just never know with prospects if they're going to turn out good or not. Like it's all a crapshoot at the end of the day. But Ryan Nelson seems to have some promise. I'm trying to see. I believe he is. I don't even know how old he is. I got this thing
23 years old. Going to be 24 by the start of the season, but I think he's on track to debut next year by the middle of the season, depending on how the D-backs want to play it. And that'll be a nice, refreshing little boost as well, and have another young arm into the rotation with a lively fastball too. So I expect him to be up at some point next year.
Yeah, he should be if he's going to be 24 years old. That's a little bit older for a prospect, but coming off college, that makes sense. 6'3", 184, so a bigger type of guy too, right-handed pitcher. So maybe he can develop some more power in that fastball and be a power pitcher for the D-backs, because that is one area they lack in their staff after Gallen. I mean, you got Bumgarner throwing like 89 with a Merrill Kelly too. Like they're just not a lot of power arms in this rotation. Tyler Gilbert too, he's basically a sinker ball pitcher. Like the D-backs are all just a bunch of sinker ball pitchers pretty much, all trying to induce ground balls. But let's move on to number 4, the prospect rankings. And this is Blake Walston, who another pitcher for the D-backs, Gatorade North Carolina High School Player of the Year. I believe he was taken out of high school as well by the D-backs, signed for around almost $2.5 million. So this is someone that was pretty young coming into the system. Of course, didn't play last year, but 2021, he played mostly in high A this season, 3.76 ERA, 117 strikeouts, and 95 innings pitched, a 233 average against. What's your take on a Blake Walston?
I'm a big Blake Walston fan. I really think he boosted his stock this year, but he was a guy going into the year I was really excited about. We had him on I put him at number 90 on our top 100 prospect list at justbaseball.com. So he actually cracked the top 100, and we updated it after the Arizona Fall League. So in the next couple of weeks, I think he's going to move up a little bit more. I mean, he showed a lot of polish because you mentioned he's a different profile guy, right? He's a high schooler, missed the 2020 season because of it being canceled. So that was a big year of development for him. He's only 20 years old and really won't be 21, I don't even think, by the start of the season. So he's still very young, 6'5", 175 pounds. I think he's going to develop a bit more physically.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
Yeah, and I think he's going to gain some more, physicality and velo on the fastball, because right now he sits more in the 91 to 93 range. I think by the time we see him come next year, I think he's going to be more in the 92, 94 range, which will really help him take that stuff to the next level. But the curveball is really strong. He's so tall that he releases that curveball from a high point, and it's one of those downer breaking balls. He also has shown a pretty good feel for a changeup for a young pitcher that I think is going to be a big, X factor for him as well. If he can see a little bit of an uptick in that velo, he's going to be a problem. And I think he's got a lot going for him. The curveball has a chance to be a plus pitch. And I think the numbers kind of speak for themselves last year. Overall, I mean, not dominating the way that a typical top 100 guy was, but remember, he was 19 going into the season and competed in high A as one of the younger pitchers against his competition. and was pretty darn good. I'm very excited about Walston. I think the duo of those two arms should have D-backs fans feeling pretty good.
Yeah, 91-mile-an-hour fastball sounds like he could fit right in the rotation right now, but maybe that velo comes naturally as he starts to bulk because 6'5", 175, like arm. I'm like 5'11", 190. Like
Yeah,
I got 15.
He's going to fill out. He's going to fill out. I really think he will. And exactly. And if that fastball goes up a little bit more, he's got so much reach. That's one of those pitches that gets in on you kind of quick, similar to a Trevor Rogers type with the Marlins, where it's the perceived velocity that's a little bit higher even than he's throwing, which I already think he's reaping the benefits from right now.
So would you say his curveball is probably his go-to strikeout pitch then?
Absolutely. That pitch is nasty. Absolutely nasty. He needs a third pitch that he's a little bit more comfortable with, but that curveball right now, he's just been riding and dominating younger hitters with.
So do you feel like he's more of a 2023 candidate, or do you think D-backs probably below 500 once again next season? Is he a potential September call-up? If they even do that anymore? I'm not even sure.
Depending on how good, how much he progresses through the minors next year. I mean, he did end up making 11 starts in high A. So they could, the D-backs could end up saying, hey, I think we want to start him in double A. If they do that, then there's a chance for a September call-up. I would assume that they don't want to rush it. And 2023 is probably a more likely scenario. But, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked with the way this kid has already shown he's a bit more developed and polished than your typical high school tall, lanky lefty.
Yeah, it's not like the D-backs are loaded with talent in their bullpen and rotation right now. Like they could use some more talent in that bullpen. They're right now saying they're going to be targeting bullpen arms in free agency. So if they could stop going after the Chris Davinskys and the Joaquin Sorias and the Hector Rondones, then maybe they have a chance of actually being competitive next year. But that's a topic for another day, Arm. So let's move on to number 3. This is one of my favorite prospects in the organization, as he should be if he's number 3 on this list. And that is Alek Thomas, who was basically the MVP of the D-backs in the minor league system this year. He was phenomenal this season in 2021. He had a 394 OBP, a 559 slugging. He played in AA and AAA, 313 average, 18 home runs, 13 stolen bases. He seems to just be able to fill up the stat sheet. Just overall, he even made the Sirius XM All-Star Futures game in Denver this season as well. So he's basically has a pretty accomplished minor league career. What can you tell me about Alek Thomas?
This kid is special. I'm a huge fan of Alek Thomas. I mean, when we talk about a prospect who looks like a veteran already, that's exactly what he is. I mean, he is so polished, so advanced at the plate. You mentioned the high on base percentage. He walks a ton. He doesn't strike out. If you get him on a pitch, you get him on a breaking ball in the dirt, he will make an adjustment in that at bat, and he'll take that next pitch. He will make adjustments between pitches. He seems like the type of player that played 4 years of college, but he was a high school guy. Mm-hmm. He's got amazing bat to ball skills. I think he showed a much more improved feel for power, hitting 18 home runs this year. You mentioned the futures game. With the high walk rate, low strikeout rate, and now power showing up too. He's a good defender. He's an absolute gamer. Does all the little things. I think he's going to be a fan favorite. It's the type of guy that's going to go head first, take the extra bag, do all the little things. I really think Alek Thomas is going to be one of those building blocks for this franchise. I think he's big league ready, start of next year. If they want him to be up there, he's ready. And I think he's going to be one of the types of prospects that hits the ground running, not as many of the growing pains as you see with some of these other guys because of how good of an approach he has at the plate.
And he's someone that's been around the game. His father works in the front office of the White Sox. So he's someone that's been around baseball his whole life. 3-sport star in high school as well. So I always love that athletic profile. But do you have any comps for Alek Thomas on the major league level? Of course, every fan wants their prospect to be the next Barry Bonds, Hall of Famer, Mike Trout. But realistically, do you think this guy has all-star in his future, Hall of Famer, or just like everyday solid outfielder for the D-backs?
I think he's got all-star in him. I try to think of a comp off the top, and there's not that many guys in the game today that are like him, which is really, I think, a huge boost for him because there's so much power at the expense of strikeouts, as we know in today's game. Mm-hmm. And with Thomas, you have a guy that just drives the ball to all fields, gap to gap. He's still going to hit his homers and walks a ton, plays good defense. I'm trying to even think off the top, like, there's not that many guys like that. And I think that's a really exciting and big boost to have. I think he's going to be the type of guy that makes several all-star games and is a really solid franchise piece for you for the next several years.
And what I like about him, he seems to have different dynamic elements to his game that the D-backs don't currently have, because I don't know if you know this, Arm, but the D-backs have no power on this roster. After the Eduardo Escobar trade, they had nobody at the end of the season with at least 15 home runs. In today's day and age in baseball, not at least have, like, teams have 7 dudes who have 20 home runs. D-backs had literally no one with 15. So a guy that could do that, plus you add the speed, maybe get you double-digit steals, even though D-backs are a team that hates to send people. He can add some different elements to the lineup that the D-backs don't already have. So I love an Alek Thomas, but the next guy we're going to talk about, I think this might be your favorite, and that is Corbin Carroll, who sadly, he was off to a hot start in high A in only 7 games, a 435 average, a 552 OBP, a 913 slugging. Like, he was on fire. He came into the season as the D-backs top prospect, and he was totally living up to his expectation level before the injury. But unfortunately, like the entire D-back season, his season was cut short. It didn't go the way he wanted to or the fans wanted to. But Arm, what can you tell me about a Corbin Carroll?
Yeah, so I think you're going to be like, didn't you just say this about Alek Thomas? Corbin Carroll has so many of the same qualities that I love about Thomas, except he's even more of a freak athlete. He's one of the fastest runners in the minor leagues and has, I think, more power than people think. He is another guy that just makes so many good in-at-bat adjustments. You can see the types of players when the D-backs target high school bats, what they're looking for. They put a lot of emphasis on what goes on between the ears, and I think that's really important. These are 2 guys that approach the game like they're 25 years old, not like they're just turning 20 or 21. They have tools, but they get the most out of those tools with effort and with a smart approach to the game. You mentioned Thomas being a guy that's been around baseball forever because of his dad being in the front office. Corbin Carroll's got that baseball just persona in him too. He is probably one of the more dynamic players in the minor leagues. I think that he's the type of dude that is going to lead the league in triples, which is crazy. I think the stadium in Arizona is built for triples. When David Peralta is leading the league in triples, I'm imagining Corbin Carroll just hitting for like 18 or 20 because he goes gap to gap, no problem. He's so tough to beat. He spoils any tough pitch you make. And he's the type of guy too, 2 strikes, he'll smack that thing into the ground and he'll beat it out at first. But the difference is he's not just a slap hitter. He's got power. And maybe not quite as much as Thomas, but I think he can hit 15 home runs or so. And when you're doing that on top of the fact that you have a top of the line speed, I'm talking like elite speed and plus defense in center field, those 2 guys, 1-2, Carroll 1, Thomas 2 in your order, that's one of the more exciting 1-2 punches potentially in baseball. I really mean that. I think that those 2 guys could be trouble and a really good start to a lineup for the D-backs. It has to get people excited.
And I'm okay with Carroll not being a 25, 30 home run guy because I don't think everyone needs to do that. But if he can be a high contact guy, like you said, because I think the D-backs do have a certain philosophy. When they target these guys in the first round, I think they want guys who can get a high contact rate, not strike out a lot, and just get on base. I think that's why they targeted a Pavin Smith in the first round a few years ago, even though that hasn't exactly worked out. So if a Corbin Carroll and an Alek Thomas can show me more of that gap power with that plus speed, because Pavin Smith, even though I like him, he just doesn't have enough elements to his game to make up for the lack of power. He doesn't really have that speed. He's not a high OBP kind of guy. So if these 2 guys can come in and be like a 370 OBP and still give me 25 stolen bases, even if it's only 15 steals, if this is like a 15 home run, 25 steal kind of guy, 290 average, getting on base a ton, I'm okay with that, even though they may not have the high upside in the power department, because I think you can still win a lot of baseball games without having 7 dudes smash 30 home runs. As long as these dudes aren't striking out, I think that would be perfect for this D-backs team. But let's talk about the number 1 guy on this list who had a disappointing end to his season, just like a Corbin Carroll, and that was the D-backs first round pick in this past draft, Jordan Lawler, I believe he only played 2 games, but I didn't even put his stats down. Like he played 2 games, like he had like 1 hit or something. Like who cares what he did in 2 games? But he did look solid in the 2 games he played before he hurt his shoulder. Signed for a pretty nice size deal, around $6.71 million. Number 2 overall pick. He gets compared a lot to Bobby Witt Jr., the Royals' top prospect. So, what can you tell me about Jordan Lawler and his projections for the D-backs?
Yeah, I mean, Lawler for me was a guy that I thought may go number 1 overall. And then as we got closer to the draft, I thought it might be Mayer, who went to the Red Sox at 4. And then I thought maybe it'd be, of course, Henry Davis. And it ended up being Henry Davis. But you could have made the case for any of those 3 guys to go number 1. So for the D-backs to get him, I think was a huge win. And you talk about the power. The other 2 guys in Carroll and Thomas are really dynamic, high floor, though, bat to ball guys that I think are going to play great defense. And you have a high chance of them being at least solid big leaguers. Lawler has a chance to be a 5-tool player and to be a potential superstar, albeit with a little bit more risk as a high school guy that's a shortstop with big power. But he's got 5-tool potential, and that's why he gets those Bobby Witt comps. He's, to me, was the best defensive high schooler in the draft at shortstop. He has the potential to be a plus defender. He's a plus runner. He's got, I think, a feel for above average power. If it all works out for him in terms of just being a good bat to ball guy, which we have to see. Obviously, we only saw 2 games, so I got to see a little bit more, but I love his swing. I love everything I've seen so far. He might take some time to climb up through the minors, but I really like his tools across the board. It's a great get for the D-backs to have him fall to them. And you know what? This is somebody that, like I said, might not get there tomorrow, but has the potential to be, your best player in your entire system very soon. And by the time he gets to the big leagues, could be your franchise player, similar to the way we're seeing Bobby Witt Jr. be regarded over with Kansas City. Obviously, he has to hit a lot to get to that point, but I think he's got a good chance to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I don't really have a take on Jordan Lawler. I haven't really seen the guy play. Yeah, he got hurt pretty quickly, but he seems like a pretty toolsy guy. And if his defense is as good as you say, like that's always an area that the D-backs love. Over the last decade, they've been one of the best defensive teams in baseball. This season, it was a real struggle, so don't look at the defensive statistics. But prior to this year, the D-backs were one of the better defensive teams in baseball. So it's no surprise that they want to go after Jordan Lawler. And especially when you think about the position he plays, shortstop. Currently, the D-back shortstop is Nick Ahmed, another defensive-minded guy, but offensively, kind of a liability. So I think the D-backs might want to be doing a little changing of the guard in a couple years, put in still an incredible defensive player, but finally have that upside and ceiling of a Jordan Lawler. So that could really help expand this D-backs lineup. If you look at him with a Carroll, a Thomas, maybe add a little Nelson, that rotation, a Walston. So D-backs future should be looking bright. Of course, you never know. Maybe they start trading these prospects to a Marlins and like a Jazz Chisholm, like what they did. If they get back a Zach Allen, I'm okay in that deal. But D-backs don't do the Dansby Swanson deal when you're trading these guys before they even have a chance to bloom. Like, let's wait. Let's be patient. If you don't think you're really competing right now anyway, might as well be patient and let these guys make it to the major league level. But Aram, I want to hand out a few awards. Only going to hand out 3. I had MVP and Cy Young written down as well, but D-backs already pretty much handed out those awards. I said Alek Thomas was the MVP of the minor leagues and Ryan Nelson was a Cy Young, and both of those guys were deserving. So we don't really have to rehash the debates for those guys, rehash the scouting profiles for those guys. But who do you think was the most improved Diamondbacks prospect when you look at what they were doing in 2019, since there was no minor league season last year, compared to how they improved through the alternate site stuff last year to how they're now performing back in the minor leagues? Who do you think was the D-backs prospect that impressed you the most and improved the most?
It's a really good question, man. Because like I look at somebody right away, of course, when we talked about what Alek Thomas did this year, but he was already great. He was already a really good prospect, but to take his game to the next level the way he did, that was obviously a really, really exciting thing to see. I also think it's a little slept on what Seth Beer did last season. I mean, I know Seth Beer is not the most exciting defensive guy in the world, but you talk about this. You talk about the fact that the D-backs don't have a ton of power. Well, here's your answer. And if we have the DH in the National League like we expect, I was really happy with the improvements that I saw from Seth Beer. And Seth Beer put up some good numbers prior, but he had not really shown the consistency to get on base, to be able to be that truly consistent power hitter. I love what I saw from Seth Beer. He cut the strikeouts down a ton. He was somewhat competent defensively. So I think he improved a little bit there as well. And I mean, he got called up for what, 5 games at 9 at-bats and homered in one of those 9 at-bats in the major leagues. I think this is a guy that could actually be one of the long shot guys for rookie of the year next year if he just absolutely mashes. It's hard for a DH to win it, but I'm a big fan of what Beer did offensively last year. I really think that he took his game to the next level, started walking a lot more. And I think people just sleep on him because he's limited defensively. But you know what? This is an offensive game, right? Like everybody wants the home runs, everybody wants the production, and Beer can give you that.
Yeah, I don't care about his defense at all, Arm, because the D-backs had only one player last year with an OPS above 760. That was Ketel Marte. The D-backs desperately need more offense in this lineup. So if Seth Beer can do it, we should add him to the team because, like you said, in the small sample size we got, the dude was tearing the cover off the ball on the major league level. Like, he was already unreal. But like everyone says was negative, they put him at first base literally one time, and he like tore his shoulder in the first game he tried playing first base for the D-backs. So the defense is definitely going to be a work in progress, but I'm praying with these CBA negotiations that they bring the universal DH back, because I'm tired of seeing all these pitchers strike out. I want to see the DH back in both leagues. I think it just makes sense. I don't understand why we have a game where 2 different leagues play by 2 different rules. It never made any sense to me. So if they bring back the DH, I'm praying Seth Beer is the everyday DH for the D-backs, and Christian Walker is entering arbitration. So you never know. I think he's coming back to the D-backs next season. He's only projected to make like around $3 million, so it won't be a crazy price tag. But if something does go awry, Ari, if the D-backs maybe decide to trade Christian Walker to a contender at the deadline who might need him a little bit more, maybe they promote a Seth Beer and just do a him and Pavin Smith, put 2 in at first base. So there's at least options for the D-backs at first base next season if they want to go away from a Christian Walker. But who do you think was the biggest faller out the rankings for the D-backs minor league system? And I think we'll see what you say, but I think this is a pretty obvious answer, but I want to see what you say first, Arm.
Yeah, I mean, Christian Robinson, right?
Yep.
He didn't even play. And I know he was dealing with some other issues off the field, right? And a pending legal issue. So off the field is one of those things where it's hard to be able to talk about that from a prospect perspective, but that's somebody that has all the upside in the world. And he came with some questions on the field and in terms of his consistency, and he just wasn't able to do it. To give you a little bit less of an obvious answer, somebody that I still like him. But this is obviously was disappointing to me because I was hoping that he would have a breakout year this year and really build off of 2019. Right-handed pitcher Luis Frias, who did get called up for a cameo, and I still think he's going to have a shot to be a good arm. But he struggled. He struggled this year. In Double-A, he just could not quite miss bats the way he did the year prior. He still got the swings and misses, but he couldn't miss barrels, I guess would be the better way to say it. When he was giving up contact, it was loud contact. 16 home runs in 78 innings, it's not going to fly. And that was the big issue for him. The fastball at times can be a bit hittable. He's got good breaking stuff. He's got a really good curveball. And the velo on the fastball's high. He's just missing over the middle a lot. If he can develop a third pitch and improve the command a little bit, he's got a chance to be a really exciting, dynamic starting pitcher. He's still just 23, but I definitely was disappointed that he took a step back last year. And still some time for him, obviously, and he could still develop into a nice piece.
Yeah, a lot of the D-backs pitching prospects were pretty disappointing last year, to say the least. Corbin Martin had like a 10.69 ERA in the few starts he made. JB Bruskakis had like a 7.77 ERA. Like, it was not a fun season for these young pitchers that I was so high on entering the season, especially seeing what they were doing in spring training. That just lets you know, guys, remember, spring training is just practice. Do not make anything of it, because I was woefully disappointed after seeing spring training, having some baseline of expectations, and then seeing what they did in the major league season. Always remember to not go too high on spring training stats. And Christian Robinson, he was sentenced, I believe, to 18 months of probation. So he is dealing with some legal troubles off the field. Like, his career like is in jeopardy and in doubt, and it's just a tough situation right now for him, for a guy who was number one in the prospect rankings according to MLB.com just last season. So to see the fact that he's fallen out the rankings and he might not, we literally don't know what's going on with his career. It's up in the air right now. So Christian Robinson, hopefully he can get it together and get back to the D-back system. But Arm, I think it's time to switch up the conversation a little bit now. We've been talking a lot of prospects, but let's get back to the major league level because we saw the awards, the finalists finally announced. And I want to first start with the Cy Young, move to the National League. We're going to be talking about Cy Young MVP and breaking it down real quick before we send Arm off today. So I guess you could throw on back your Locked On Marlins hat. I guess you could switch it out now for your Locked On MLB Prospects hat. But let's first start with the National League and talk about the Cy Young because you got three finalists: Corbin Burnes of the Brewers, Max Scherzer of the Dodgers, and Zach Wheeler of the Phillies. And I got some stats here, courtesy of MLB.com. Burnes won the MLB ERA crown in 2021 with 2.43 ERA. Scherzer was phenomenal. He had a 2.46 ERA, 236 strikeouts, 180 innings pitched. And then you had Zach Wheeler, who had a 2.78 ERA, led baseball in innings pitched, complete games, shutouts, batters faced. I think Corbin Burnes led the majors in strikeout rate, strikeouts per nine, strikeout to walk rate. So all three of these guys have a different case. All of them led the league in some stat or another. But when you look at that Cy Young race in the National League, of course it's loaded. But who do you lean with for the Cy Young Award?
Yeah, I mean, you set the stage well, right? Every guy has that strength for their resume. It's hard to say that Corbin Burnes shouldn't be it. You know, I know that the argument for some is like, oh, he only threw 167 innings. And I understand that. But, you know, this was a year where we're coming off of a weird season and a lot of guys were managed very carefully. And, you know, to compare it, I called it the Blake Snell precedent because Blake Snell won the Cy Young in the AL in 2018, despite throwing far less innings than Verlander. And I forget who the other, Corey Kluber was the other finalist. So I looked at it there and I'm like, okay, you can still win it when you throw the least innings. Back then, 22 pitchers threw at least 190 innings. This year, this past season, only 7 pitchers threw more than 190 innings. So I think you got to keep it relative to the competition. And Corbin Burnes, from a numerical standpoint, he dominated. I mean, he had the best ERA. He had just dominating numbers. He pitches in one of the most hitter-friendly parks in baseball and gave up the least home runs in baseball per 9 innings. Just absolute domination, struck out so many guys. I loved everything I saw from Burnes this year. He's got to be the guy for me for NL Cy Young.
Yeah, and it's tough. Like, I don't even know how to lean, honestly, because it's such a loaded field. And when you're doing these podcasts, you never want to be the fence sitter. Like, no one likes a podcast where a dude like, oh, yeah, of course, you're like the 3 finalists. Like, that's why they're the finalists. But if I had to choose to go with one, I would probably lean Corbin Burnes as well, just because of those strikeout numbers are so dominant.
So absurd.
So absurd. His quality start percentage was a little bit better than a Scherzer and a Zach Wheeler, like literally just like 1 or 2 starts more than those guys. He was second in game score, if you care about that. So I think he was just a little bit more dominant, and he did help throw a no-hitter as well. So I guess you got to count that. He helped lead the Brewers to a postseason berth as well. Max Scherzer was dominant. Zach Wheeler was dominant as well, but I still care about ERA and the fact that he led in ERA and was striking out the most people. I'm probably going to give it to Corbin Burnes of the Brewers. So let's now transition to the American League. And before we transition real quick, I thought the National League finalists were pretty loaded compared to the American League because I was surprised like a Walker Buehler wasn't a finalist, even a Brandon Woodruff. Like you could have had just said the finalists were just the Brewers' top 3 starters. Like that's how phenomenal they were.
Literally. And Buehler, I mean, I was talking about that with my buddy a couple hours ago. We're like, you could make the case for Buehler to fully be in the conversation too. I think if he's in the AL, he might even win it. It definitely is better on the National League side. I totally agree.
Yeah, I thought this was impossible trying to, especially at the All-Star break when I was trying to do like my All-Star ballot for these pitchers in the National League. I was like, there's like 18 dudes with like a 2.5 ERA or worse. And when I went to the American League, it was like 3 guys in the same situation. So the pitching in the National League is definitely a lot hotter right now.
A little bit of the DH effect too. I think, you can't sleep on the fact that you get one batter off every time through. And you have to wonder how that's going to even out if they do have the DH in the National League next year.
No, that's a great point. That's a big reason why I want to see the DH back because it adds a little bit more offense. Now, I do think maybe the talent's a little bit better in the National League because when you're debating who's the best pitcher, 38-year-old Lance Lynn, Robbie Ray, who the D-backs just literally gave away, or Garrett Cole, who just doesn't seem like the same guy after sticky stuff. The DH plays a part into it, but I think there's also some talent level. But I definitely agree with you that the DH plays a big part into it. But let's talk about that American League Cy Young because you got a Garrett Cole. He's going to be a finalist. You got not going to be, he is a finalist. You got Lance Lynn of the White Sox, Garrett Cole of the Yankees. And man, I can't even believe he's a finalist, but Robbie Ray of the Blue Jays, former Arizona Diamondback, and Robbie Ray was just so frustrating to watch that last season in 2020. And the fact that he's even here, it's honestly mind-blowing to me. But Robbie Ray won the AL ERA title with 2.84 mark. He led the majors in strikeouts as well, pitched 190 innings. So Robbie Ray had himself a phenomenal season. Lance Lynn had a phenomenal season. Oh, were you saying something? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I wasn't.
Okay. I thought I heard like a noise in my headphones for some reason. You had Lance Lynn. He was pretty phenomenal on the White Sox this year as well. But I think the fact that he's on loaded rotation might have helped him out a little bit. And then you had Garrett Cole of the Yankees. He had a 3.23 ERA. He had 243 strikeouts, which was third in the majors. But I don't know. Garrett Cole down the stretch, I don't think I believed in him as much. But where do you lean for the Cy Young? I think the American League is actually kind of easy.
Really? I honestly, I struggled weirdly with the American League because I like Robbie Ray, but he also gave up a lot of hard contact.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's what he does, right? He gives up a lot of hard contact. I think a lot of it happened to go in the gloves. But, at the end of the day, it's what they did that year. And Robbie Ray paced the league in strikeouts. He paced an ERA, like you said. And this was in some bad environments too, right? Like he was pitching – in multiple spots, whether it was Buffalo or Dunedin or wherever the heck they stuck the Blue Jays, which were all hitter-friendly environments. He was able to survive them, and I thought he was obviously the best version of himself that we've seen. His whip was strong. Strikeouts were ridiculous. ERA was strong. And like you said, Cole faded down the stretch. I'm probably going Robbie Ray, but I do think that Cole still had some of those defining moments, He had a couple complete games and some spots had those really big starts, but on a macro scale, I'm probably going Robbie Ray.
Yeah, I think for me, it's that second half is really the big difference between these two because Cole had a 4.14 ERA in the second half. September, October, he had a 5.13 ERA, gave up at least 5 earned runs in 2 of his last 3 starts. So right when the Yankees were really trying to get away from the Red Sox in that second wild card spot, he just kept bringing his team back in. So because of that, and then I juxtaposed that with a Robbie Ray, who had a second half ERA of 2.53. It was 3.13 in the first half. So he actually got better in the second half of the season, and he led the American League in quality start percentage at 72%. So on average, he was giving you the best start among the 3 finalists. So I'm going to have to lean Robbie Ray for that one, which just pains me to say because the D-backs basically just gave him up for nothing. And I thought that was the right move at the time because I was over the Robbie Ray experience. But here we are, him potentially about to win the Cy Young.
I mean, I'll be honest, man. I did not see this coming either. He was the type of guy when I saw him pitching, I was like, all right, I'll bet the over. I never thought that he would be able to do this. And I think he's going to take a little bit of a step back next year just because when you look at a lot of the advanced metrics, they point towards him being a little bit lucky with a lot of the hard contact he gave up. But there's no denying that he made some major improvements. So some major bump in his velo and got much tighter pants as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Robbie Ray, he looks like a different cat right now, and it was probably good to help get him out of Arizona. I got into some Twitter spat one time where I said the change of scenery probably helped him out a lot, but some Blue Jays fan responded. They're like, no, all the Blue Jays did was make him go back to his original delivery, and that makes me question, why did the D-backs change his delivery in the first place? I don't know. Maybe that's why so many of these pitching prospects struggle when they get to the major league season. They just start messing with their delivery. Who knows? Hopefully the D-backs can get that cleaned up so they don't miss out on more potential top prospects, more potential Cy Young Award winners in their system. And again, Robbie Ray just was going downhill the last few seasons with the D-backs, and now he's back to being a Cy Young candidate. It's really crazy when you think about it, and maybe playing in the American League helps. Who knows? He is going against the DH, but let's talk about MVP now, Arm, and let's first start with the National League. You got 3 finalists, of course: Bryce Harper, Juan Soto, Fernando Tatis. Harper really came on strong in the second half. He led the majors in slugging with .615, slugging percentage, OPS 1044. You got Juan Soto, who was putting up a crazy slash line of 313, 465, 534, 29 home runs. And then you got Fernando Tatis, who did so much for his team. He led the league in home runs and steals, finished first in the NL in home runs with 42, 25 stolen bases, which was third, a 975 OPS. Who are you leaning toward for MVP in the National League? Because I think this is a pretty tough one.
It's really tough, and it's a shame that Tatis missed time. Otherwise, I think I'd consider him. But also the way the Padres faded makes it kind of hard as well.
Yeah.
And moving to the outfield, and he was so special, and I think he'll get his MVP. I'm not too worried about that. It's really tough between Harper and Soto because Soto was so dominant in the second half as well, especially down the stretch. I mean, he got on base over a 500 clip in the second half. I mean, that's just ridiculous. More than half of the time he's getting on base. But also, he took a lot of walks. He didn't hit for as much power as Harper, who was doing it for a team that was basically dead in the water, and he carried them to relevancy down the stretch. And I think that's got to matter, right? Like, he carried them and kept them alive when that team would have been well out of the hunt in July. And he kept them in it to the last couple, maybe the last 2 weeks of the season, last week of the season or so. There's got to be a value to that. I felt like Harper was barely seeing any pitches to hit. He'd see one pitch to hit a game and he'd hit it out. And he'd go 1 for 1 with a homer and 3 walks. It's just, that to me is the most valuable player. Soto had an incredible year. I just think when you're looking at what he meant to the Phillies in Harper, that's my MVP.
Yeah, how much do you actually play record into these awards? Because I know a lot of people are like, look, one guy can't, change the fortune of a team. But I'm like, still, if one guy had a team that made the postseason by a little bit, one guy's team was like last place in his division, like I'm probably going to give the nod to a guy whose team made the postseason. So where do you fall on that debate?
Yeah, it's tough because I think it's situational. And as much as people don't want to pretend that there's a narrative behind it, there's always a narrative influencing how you're voting for the MVP or how these guys are voting for the MVP. And I look at Juan Soto, they burned the team down around him, and that definitely, you'd think that would make it harder on him, but it didn't. He got pitched around a ton, and he took his walks, and he got on base a lot, and he didn't have the pressure to really have to produce. So as they pitched around him, he walked a ton. I think he walked like 30% of the time in the last month. And that really boosts the on base. That's why his on base was so high. When I look at Harper, he's a guy that's like, okay, my offense isn't doing anything right now, and we need to score. I might see one pitch to hit. I better hit it out. And he was doing that. I mean, he was hitting bomb after bomb after bomb down the stretch, and so many doubles, so many extra base hits. He slugged, I think, 70-something points higher than Juan Soto. I just think with the damage that Harper was doing for a team that desperately needed it, I'd put a little bit more weight on the team that really needed him to do it. And he felt that pressure, and he, rose to the occasion.
Yeah, I think I'm going to lean toward Harper for all the reasons you said. And it's kind of hard to give it to Tatis, especially the way his team collapsed. It was like if it was like a Blue Jays type situation where his team was battling and just missed out because it was like a tiebreaker situation, whatever. But this Padres team, I think, had like one more win than the D-backs after the All-Star break. Like, this team fell off the map, and it wasn't like it was Tatis's fault. He was still putting up numbers, but this team just wasn't the same. And if you're an MVP, you probably get your team to the postseason, even though one guy can't do it all. With the lead that they had, how good their team was, the talent, I was just disappointed, and it would just leave a bad taste in my mouth if Tatis ended up winning the award. So I'm going with a Bryce Harper too. It's just hard to vote for a guy on the team that just had no chance of making the postseason in Juan Soto in the Nationals. So I agree with you, Armland, for all the reasons you said. So let's wrap it up now. One last one. American League MVP. This one, I think, is really coming down to 2 guys. They got to throw a third dude in here with Marcus Semien, but I think it's really going to be the Ohtani versus Vlad Guerrero Jr. So Honestly, Simeon, I'm sorry. I'm not even going to bring you up here because I think everyone's voting for either Ohtani, Vlad Guerrero Jr. I don't even think I have to tell you the numbers. Guerrero Jr. was phenomenal. He was basically the best position player in baseball in the American League, and Ohtani was just the best overall player when you consider his pitching, of course, and his hitting and what he can do from every facet of the game. So, both these teams missed the postseason, but for different reasons. But who do you lean with for MVP? And again, this is one of the first times all three finalists were guys whose teams didn't make the postseason, which is interesting. I don't know if that's a very good look for baseball to say, let's just give out MVPs to players on awful teams, even though the Blue Jays weren't awful. Let's give it out awards to players on teams that don't matter at all. So, where do you lean for MVP in the American League?
Yeah, any other year, I think it's Vlad Guerrero and a runaway. But you're looking at Shohei Ohtani, who did something we've never really seen before. You've got to give it to the guy that did something we've never seen before, right? He pitched well. Like, he was a top 30 pitcher in baseball, probably, maybe even better than that. I'd say probably top 20 starter for most of the year. Then also is pacing baseball for much of the year in homers. And oh, by the way, he's fast too and stole 20 plus bags. Like, he's not from this planet. I think that, just the pure nature of, like, people mentioned Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth didn't do this. Like, this is something we've never seen. I've got to give it to him. And it's really a shame because, what Vlad Jr. did was so amazing. But the fact that we're even talking about Vlad Jr. after the year that Ohtani had just says, I think, how special Vladdy was offensively this year. But when you're a pioneer, you got to win the MVP. And that's exactly what Ohtani was.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a dumb take, but basically I felt like if the Blue Jays make the postseason, I think I'm going to lean with Vlad Guerrero Jr. But since we're talking about two non-playoff teams, as good as Vlad Guerrero Jr. was, I think I have to give it to Ohtani as well, because what's been the big knock on the Angels franchise during the Mike Trout era? They just can't find pitching. So what did they do? They found not only a number 2 guy to go with their Mike Trout in the lineup, but they also found their number 1 starter, basically, in Ohtani, who's only allowed to pitch like every 7 days because he's also their best slugger without a Mike Trout in the lineup. So because of that, I think I have to give it to Ohtani. It's not like the Angels were terrible. I don't have their record off the top of my head, but they were like, 12-ish games below 500. I want to say they were probably around 69, 70 wins. So they weren't like complete. They weren't Arizona Diamondbacks bad. I think they had a little bit more fight to them.
Without Ohtani, they're Arizona Diamondbacks.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, because he literally did everything, right? Like, he was their ace and he was their best hitter. And so without him, he literally, that team is maybe one of the worst in baseball.
Yeah. And fantasy,
the guy that did it all.
And ESPN Fantasy needs to fix their whatever they had it where you can only play Ohtani as a pitcher or a position player on certain days. Like, if the dude is doing both on the same day, then let the stats count for both and let the numbers count for both. So I don't understand why ESPN even did that.
Yeah, again, it just kind of shows how much of a pioneer he is. That he's breaking fantasy.
Do you think he goes number 1 in fantasy next year? No question.
He has to, right? Like, you're getting a stud pitcher and a stud hitter, and he's also stealing bases for you. Like, no matter what league you're in, that's crazy.
Yeah, I think he was like 500 points better, more than like the next player in my fantasy league or something. It was just something insane. I was the commissioner of my fantasy league, and I think next season I might make stolen bases basically as valuable as home runs because no one steals in baseball anymore. So I think I might do something wacky in my fantasy baseball league next year. But just to recap, Arm Lane, let's go through the awards once again. National League, Corbin Burns, Cy Young.
Yeah.
All right. American League, I'm saying Robbie Ray. Are you going Robbie Ray or are you going Garrett Cole?
Robbie Ray. I'm going Robbie Ray.
All right, Robbie Ray. MVP National League, we're both saying Bryce Harper.
Yep.
All right. And then MVP American League, Ohtani for both of us as well.
We agree on all of these.
We agree on all of these. Yeah, I guess it was tough, but I guess in the end we agreed. Maybe I just agreed with you because I didn't want to look dumb, and if I had to go down, I'm gonna go down with you, Armlane. So
it sounds good.
I had to just hop on the bandwagon. I know it says it there for the YouTube viewers, but for the people listening to today's podcast, where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me at RMLayton8 on Twitter. And then, of course, the Locked On MLB Prospects podcast as well. I'll be talking about the D-back system very soon. And also writing it up at justbaseball.com, which I'm really excited to be doing some off-season previews. So I'll be off-season previewing the D-backs as well. I might trade Ketel Marte. I'm sorry, but Might get you guys a nice little haul. We'll see what I do in the offseason preview, but I'm really excited about that too. But thanks for having me on, man.
Off the top of your head, what's the number one destination if you had a perfect place for Ketel Marte? Because listen, you don't understand how many times I have to tell people when they come on this podcast, we're not trading Ketel Marte. He's under club control for a few more years. He's making like dirt money. Like the dude is cheap and he's our best player. Like he's not going anywhere. But in the scenario that he does get traded, where's the place that you think needs him more and the D-backs can maximize the most value? Just a little tease for that off-season article.
You're gonna hate it, but the Yankees.
Okay, I'm done. You're getting you're getting removed from the stream, Arm.
And the Marlins, because I want him on my team.
Of course. Can we get Jazz back in that deal then? I would even get Jazz back. I like Jazz a lot. He's got a nice little profile. I like him in fantasy. So we'll see for next year. I might have to draft him in fantasy.
He's got that swag too. I love the way he carries himself.
He's got that swag for sure. And Arm, you got some swag to yourself too, sir. So thank you for hopping on today's pod. Locked On Marlins host and Locked On MLB Prospects host Arm Layton, breaking down the D-backs prospects, finalists for the awards. Arm, thank you for hopping on today, sir, and thank you for sharing your time.
Thanks for having me, man.